In a rare late-night order, the Supreme Court on Saturday blocked the Trump administration from using the Alien Enemies Act to deport illegal aliens. The administration had relied on the law to expedite removals of some of the most dangerous individuals in the country, including alleged MS-13 gang members. This wasn't a final ruling on the statute, but it froze the current deportation efforts and likely signals a loss for the White House in later court cases. Once again, Donald Trump faces betrayal from the very justices he appointed. Only Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented. The president now finds himself at odds with a politically driven judiciary that seems to believe unelected lawyers, not the commander-in-chief, should run the executive branch. Mass deportations remain essential if the United States hopes to remain a functioning nation. But the legal system isn't the only obstacle. Mass democracy, often hailed as a bulwark against tyranny, turns out to be a remarkably easy system to rig. When the ruling class can't depend on the current electorate to keep them in power, they simply replace it. Democrats understand that new immigrants overwhelmingly support the party that promises wealth redistribution, from the established population to the newly arrived. Illegal immigrants may not be able to vote immediately, but many will gain amnesty or eventually get naturalized, or they'll just cheat. And their children will certainly receive birthright citizenship unless something changes pretty dramatically. That's the plan. Long-term voter replacement to eliminate serious opposition in national elections. The crisis at the southern border never threatened Democrats. They designed it. It wasn't a policy failure. It was an electoral strategy. And the Supreme Court saw no urgency in stopping a border policy designed to rig American elections for generations. The Biden administration ran a cell phone app that fast-tracked illegal entry. It didn't just leave the southern border open, it flew plane loads of Haitian migrants directly into the United States and dumped them into small Midwestern towns where they overwhelmed the local population and infrastructure. At no point did Chief Justice John Roberts step in, despite the administration's blatant disregard for federal law and its constitutional duty to protect the citizens of the United States. When government officials at every level violated core constitutional rights during the pandemic, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and more, the Supreme Court barely stirred. When federal intelligence agencies colluded with social media platforms to censor Americans and manipulate the outcome of presidential elections, the justices stayed silent. No emergency orders, no late-night rulings. Even when January 6 defendants were charged under a statute that clearly did not apply to them, the court dragged its feet for years before taking up the case. But when MS-13 gang members faced deportation under a long-standing federal statute, the Supreme Court sprang right into action, issuing a midnight order to protect their due process rights. Different rules for different people, and we're all just supposed to pretend that we didn't notice. The situation has become so absurd, so transparently political, that Justice Alito called it out in a blistering dissent, highlighting the irony of denying due process in emergency order supposedly aimed at protecting due process. Alito said, quote, "In sum, literally in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party, within 8 hours of receiving the application, with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanations for its order. I refuse to join this court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate." End quote. The absurdity doesn't end with the timing. Likely tens of millions of illegal immigrants already lived in the U.S. before Biden took office. Since then, more than 6 million, at least, have entered illegally. Now consider the implications of that. If each of those 6 million requires a full court hearing before deportation, Trump could devote every waking moment of his presidency to the task and still fall short of removing even that cohort. The implications are clear. If Biden can import millions without due process, but Trump can't deport them without it, then the system has no future. Democrats get to flood the electorate with a new dependent voting class during their terms, while Republican presidents get bogged down in endless legal entanglements trying to undo the damage. every Republican president becomes a man with a bucket, bailing water out of a cruise ship with a hole the size of Mexico in the hull. The left keeps warning that Trump's battles with the courts will risk plunging us into a constitutional crisis, but that constitutional crisis began tens of millions of illegal immigrants ago. Federal judges have already blocked the Trump administration's efforts to reform the military, reduce spending, and rein in foreign aid. They act as though they, and not the president, command the executive branch. Now the Supreme Court has taken the absurd position that the due process rights of illegal alien gang members matter more than the rights of American citizens. Any government that fails to secure its own borders or fails to remove those who violate those borders has abandoned its most basic responsibilities. No country that tolerates mass illegal immigration can remain a country for very long. The judiciary isn't defending the rule of law. It's eroding it, obstructing legitimate executive action and undermining democratic accountability while weakening national sovereignty. The Trump administration has ambitious and vital goals: restoring American industry, ending the globalist drift in foreign policy, removing the progressive rot from universities, and dismantling the administrative state. All of these are critical, and I'm here for every single one of them. But none of it will matter without mass deportations. Tens of millions of people live in the United States in defiance of our laws. They must be expelled. The only question is how far the courts will go to damage their own credibility in the process. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. Speaking of the rule of law, I'd like to take a minute to remind you about something that the media and the courts and the left and a lot of people on the right actually would rather have you ignore. You've heard the media's version of January 6th, but now it's time to see what they've been hiding. The final episode of Blaze TV's in-depth investigation just dropped, and it blows the narrative wide open. You've got Capitol surveillance footage, conflicting timelines, and serious questions about Officer Harry Dunn's story. It's streaming right now exclusively on Blaze TV. So subscribe today at blazetv.com/J6. That's blazetv.com/J6 to watch the full investigation from the very beginning. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to go ahead and get these broadcasts as podcasts, head to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show. Make sure to leave a rating or a review because it really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter or Gab or Substack or Instagram, if you'd like to get these videos on Rumble or Odyssey, the links to do all of that are down below in the description. And of course, you can pick up merch, you can read my columns, and you can watch all of my episodes over at The Blaze. Thank you everybody for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.